It's 11:30. We're here for a hearing on the House Resolution 129. Representative Neal, you have the floor.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. Thank you to the committee for the privilege to come before you today. Now, the bill is small, and like many say, it's a simple bill, and it is a simple bill, but I want to walk with you um, through the end goal of what the simple first measure will ultimately result in. So, I will start by saying this has not been done before in this manner. So essentially, this resolution is an extension of the Hope Scholarship designed to allow for a portion of lottery proceeds to fund an initiative for Hope recipients who would prefer to take a different path instead of going to the traditional college and accepting Hope in its traditional form. This provides for the option to select a merit-based micro, seed, or small loan in lieu of obtaining the traditional Hope funds for college. Over the course of the past couple months, when me and Legislative Council have been working to figure out a way to best go about this initiative, the first step is what we settled on, which is asking the question. We simply need to ask the question which brought us to this resolution. Outlining the program would come later, but we didn't want to put the cart before the horse. Expanding the HOPE program under the same conditions that we currently have under this resolution, nothing about HOPE or who qualifies for it changes. It would allow for us to first fund the initiative, then in a bipartisan manner, outline how we want to construct the program. But as a general standard, we thought it would look something like this. Initial thoughts would be for the applicant to apply via an application that we currently have that includes aspects of the business they're trying to fund to the Georgia Student Finance Commission, which currently houses the HOPE and other grant programs. Assess the business interests of the student against a loan they need, incorporate their business with the Secretary of State, get funded based on what we ultimately construct as the program later down the road. The goal is simple. My goal is simply to give young people a chance to try. We call it HOPE for a reason, and this is an extension of that. The name of the program as a whole is not by accident. We give students a chance to test out that dream that they have had for the longest time, providing immediate support for the young visionaries that are right here in this state. For instance, a high school senior sitting in English class, they might not know what college they want to go to, but they know they have a great idea that they just have no idea how to fund or get off the ground. And that's where we step in. This makes it where their dream does not have to be delayed. For entrepreneurs in our education system to step out of high school and directly into ownership if they should so choose. Examples, cosmetology, barbering, trucking, CDLs, various other industries, they have startup costs associated with them that some people have trouble with, honestly. To include tech school students at like Atlanta Tech or Savannah Tech down in your neck of the woods, Mr. Chairman, or good old Valdosta State where I did my undergrad. No matter where you are, we can create a new way to support this dream. Additionally, whether it's someone getting a small loan to cover an investment or into a franchise or franchise partnerships that offer full wraparound services, simply an entrepreneur that really has a great idea and needs the funding to start it up. Food trucks, mobile services, storefronts, beauty lines, clothing lines, licensing, certifications, and more. This is the opportunity that this bill provides. I myself have encountered a number of young people, some of which who have contacted me with some great ideas and opportunities before them, but don't have the startup cash to pursue it at the present time. So this bill allows us to have the initial funding mechanism to start supporting great Georgians with great ideas. Additional aspects we would later incorporate will be to define the size of the business and account for those who need a microloan versus a larger investment. Today is the opportunity to say yes to taking the first step to allowing students to have a chance at creating a different life for themselves and pushing forward with the idea that Georgia is the place to do business, and now we can become the place where we create those business owners straight out of school without delay.
We have questions. Number 16.
Okay.
You're on if, I'm not sure where 16 is at.
Oh,
that's me. I'm sorry. These numbers are a little different. Representative Neal, thank you. This is curious
Yes.
to me, and I love entrepreneurship, and I don't think we do enough to teach that in our K-12 pipeline. I know we do with our marketing education programs and
Yes.
organizations like FBLA and DECA and whatnot. So in this concept, and I know it might be early on, and we might can talk about this later because this is interesting to me, but if a student chose this option
Yes.
and we're basically enabling them to be an entrepreneur or explore that option, if for whatever reason it didn't succeed or they realized, hey, this wasn't really what I thought it would be, would they still be able to go get a associate's or a 4-year degree and use Hope for paying for that? Or would they have run through their Hope eligibility by taking this option?
Great question. So yes, when it comes to that aspect, it can be either or. So when it comes to some of these loans, especially micro loans, they're very, very small amounts of money. Now, it might seem strange just to those of us that have jobs, but trying to get a couple $100, even $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 can be burdensome for a startup entrepreneur. And a lot of banks do not provide those types of loans because of how small they are. So we can actually, when it comes to, like you said, speaking later on the bill, but at the same time, we can provide an option where you can say you need $1,000 to start this business to get it off the ground. Say it doesn't work. You can still go back into the traditional schooling route, just simply because you're not exhausted any maximums that we have created.
Good. Number 8. Who's number 8? Williams. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative. I'm trying to wrap around it. I haven't had a chance. I didn't even know
It's okay.
that this is what you were bringing forward. It is an interesting concept. I know the microloans have been successful in other ventures. A couple of questions. Now, for clarification, this will come out of the proceeds of the lottery that's
correct.
currently designated for Hope.
That's correct.
And how will you qualify? Will the qualifications be the same as they are for Hope?
Exactly the same.
But you'd have the option of trying to get a micro loan for an idea you might have.
Mhm.
Now, I didn't see it in here, it might be in here, I haven't read it yet, but who would determine the validity of these loans and how would you go about making application and the determining factor?
Yes, great question. So initially, under the thinking that I had was to leave it at the present time under the entity that currently handles Hope and all of our grant programs, which is the Georgia Student Finance Commission. I'll use a structure that we already have in place. Nothing changes outside of the fact of us offering these loans to students. Everything else about the model would stay the same.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative.
No problem. Thank you.
Chairman Hogan.
Would this violate in any way the intended purpose of Hope and the lottery? I mean,
Nope.
the lottery was passed by the citizens of the state of Georgia for the purpose of educating people, right?
Yes.
And this is a different situation.
Yes. So that's why we're doing the constitutional amendment to ask the public, what would they prefer? Would they like to offer this to our students? And I think you might be slightly leaning towards like the gratuities clauses. And currently we get around gratuities because Hope has already been designed to, under our Constitution, to allow for giving away of money through Hope. But because this is a loan program, we do not have a gratuities issue, because it is going to be a repayment situation.
One more.
Yes, sir.
Hope is lacking in funds right now. Would this deplete some of those funds that we need for education?
Not in the sense that you're thinking, because the student still has a choice of what direction they want to take. And then at one point, initially, I mean, at one point during this process, the interest from these loans will feed back into the originating program. So we'll be funding from lottery proceeds and we'll be funding from the interest.
One more.
Certainly.
Is this patterned after any other lottery programs in the nation, or where do you get this idea of this type of a program?
So ironically enough, I just came up with it. Upon speaking upon speaking with legislative counsel, and we've had, research done through the Capitol here, we found that we have not been able to find any other state who has done this or tried it in this way. So this will be a first time at just trying something new.
It's an interesting concept, and thank you for bringing it.
No, thank you so much for your question.
Representative Mellon?
Yes, Representative Neal. So this bill, when I wanted to start my landscape grass cutting business, when I was first out of high school, and I was a much younger and strapping gentleman, and I could run a lawnmower sun up to sundown. Would this have helped me to start that grass cutting business, be able to purchase a Toro zero-turn mower versus going to graduate school to get a master's degree and take on $100,000 in debt?
That is correct. It would have provided for that.
If this was 20 years ago, I might not be sitting here. I'd be on my mower today.
Thank you, Representative.
Other questions?
Not too late.
Yes, sir. 22. There you go. Yes, sir.
Representative Neal, I take it there's some enabling legislation that'll go along with this?
That's correct. That would follow up to this, but initially speaking with legislative counsel, they felt it would be appropriate to do this first instead of trying to build a whole program, and it might not make it out of this committee.
And does it tie the recipients to the loans to the Hope Scholarship or something like that?
Define, how are you defining tie?
What I mean is there a tie to the lottery? Does it, for someone who's graduating from college but needs a startup, is this what the enabling legislation says?
The enabling legislation would kind of outline the program as a whole and how we do it, and what happens with those funds after the portion from lottery is allotted for.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking is just any Joe Blow out there can't come in and apply for it. Is that?
Yes, that is correct. The way you qualify for it is the same way you qualify for Hope.
Oh, okay, thank you. I
Absolutely,
appreciate
no
it.
problem.
Other questions? Is there, I don't have a list for anybody in the audience. Anybody else want to testify to this? Yes, ma'am.
Got a
Chairman
question.
Alston.
Would this loan program be operated through the lottery or through the Department of Community Affairs where most things like this is done?
It would either be the Department of Community Affairs, or I was thinking that it would go through the Georgia Student Finance Commission because they already handle Hope and all other associated grant programs.
So
we-
this would be like a grant instead of a loan?
No, it would have to be a loan.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
And it would not be, this is not on the lottery. The lottery is not responsible for operating this program.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Representative. This being a hearing only, we will probably meet back again on Thursday to hear another. So I'm going to ask the chairman to come over and chair the next committee.
Perfect. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, members of the committee, thank you for being here today. And as Chairman said, we now have HR 184 in front of you. And Chairman Stevens, if you'll confirm your LC number for us, just to make sure we're looking at the right version.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're coming off of LC 490490S.
All right. Well, thank you. And if that, go right ahead.
As I present the Harry Geisinger Rural Georgia Jobs and Growth Act, those of you might not remember Harry. He's had served 2 stints here in the Georgia legislature, and every single year he tried to do something with horse racing. That's what the bill does, is it specifically focuses on jobs in rural Georgia that can create an enormous amount of jobs and economic opportunity. Before I do that, let me just read you a little bit, because some of you are relatively new to the General Assembly, and I just want to tell you a little bit about Harry. He was, of course, he served in the United States Navy from 1953 to 1957 in the Korean conflict, and he served 3 tours on the USS Roanoke as a quartermaster. He became a Georgia son, if you will. He and his wife eloped to Atlanta in 1959 after meeting at the Delta Zeta House in the University of Cincinnati campus, where he got a BA degree in business and arts. He had 4 children, and they all lived in the Atlanta area, all during their entire 55-year married life. He spent most of his weekends teaching soccer and coaching soccer. And of course, he spearheaded the first college scouting soccer program to promote local high school players for scholarships. And in 2006, was inducted into the Georgia Soccer Hall of Fame. His passion was politics. He worked really, really hard to try to get 2 things done, and one of them was to eliminate the birthday tax on vehicles. And if you once he passed away, we got that passed. It was a very big deal, but every single year he knew that we had an opportunity that we were missing, and so he pushed for it. Never got done, and of course, during both stints that he was here, both in the late 60s and all the way up till he passed away, we never got this. So we're pushing this thing today in honor of Harry Geisinger. Back in 2004, his second stint, whenever Representative Tom Campbell was tapped for the Fulton County Superior Court by Sonny Perdue, he was asked to then run for the seat again, and understand he was getting up in age at that time. So again, we move on to the Harry Geisinger HR 184. As then, it will incentivize $550 million initial investment in the state of Georgia, $250 million in the state, 250, 150, 150 each for 3 tracks in the state of Georgia. And all these are without any tax incentives whatsoever. And there's no local incentives whatsoever. It'll create a new industry in Georgia, horse breeding and sales, that could be over $1 billion in economic impact to our state, particularly enhancing the investment for horse breeding farms in most of the rural parts of Georgia. And I'll remember, y'all just think back just a minute to, and I'm looking over to the chairman over here, back in just a few years ago, 2018, whenever we had Hurricane Michael come through and decimate South Georgia with the first Hurricane 3 since the 1800s. It's going to be 20 years before these folks have the opportunity to get their trees growing again. And of course, we all know what it did to the pecan industry down in that part of the state. This opens up some opportunity for those folks. Again, it'll create thousands of jobs throughout the state. Each horse creates, and it's in your packet there, 20 jobs per horse. And there's a chart in there showing you that. It'll attract international events to our state, just like the Super Bowl. It's called the Breeders' Cup. It'll benefit the tourism industry. We'll create a unique event space to enable year-round events and attractions. There shall be no off-track betting, slots, or game tables. Just to make sure that everybody understands that in this bill, it does not authorize in any way casino gambling, or in my terms, destination resorts. 90% of the revenue bet on races at the track will come from other states and even other countries. So why is a racetrack necessary to create horse racing and breeding for an industry in Georgia? From a pari-mutuel wagers placed on these racetracks in our state, funds will be set aside to create a robust horse breeders fund, which is called the fund. Proceeds will be paid out to the proceeds will be paid out to the owners and the breeders who breed, raise, and sell their horses bred in this state. While it's a unique industry, while an equine industry has existed in Georgia for many years, currently there's absolutely no incentive for owners and breeders to actually breed, raise, and race their horses in our state. Rather, virtually all Georgia owners, breeders send their brood mares to other states such as Florida. And while I mentioned Florida, they're one of our newest. And there's Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, New York. Florida in Ocala alone is a $1.2 billion industry. It is the largest in the country. We have an opportunity here for some economic development, folks. Those states offering a lucrative owners breeders awards for racehorses bred in their state and provides a significant additional value to the racehorse when they're sold or raced. Thus, millions of dollars leave Georgia for the benefit of those states where there's racetracks and breeders. Again, if you'll look at the big horse, the horses and the big business piece that's in your track, you'll notice that the largest, that Marion County is the top horse county in the United States with 37,000 purebred horses. The next closest is Riverside, California, with a third that number. Ladies and gentlemen, let me move on to the bill. HR 184 has three pieces in it that we hope that you'll consider. And Representative Stacey Evans is here, which has one piece, will immediately move about $600 million for available funds for our folks in pre-K and also in available to the Hope Scholarship. Let me move, if you will, to, because I'm going to get Representative Evans to come up and speak to number 3 in section 1. And it's talking about the horse racing piece, if you will. That starts on line 21. And all this is in the constitutional amendment. So there shall be no gaming, if you will, no pun intended. Whenever we put in the constitutional amendment, you cannot change it through enabling legislation. It's going to create, on line 132, a special healthcare fund where 10% of the total revenue of taxes are going to go to for healthcare. As you might know, some of our hospitals have folded this year. 10% of those revenues are going to go there. For the first time, it's going to create an opportunity fund where the funds shall be distributed to for pre-K and for post-secondary education for those families whose median income is below 50%. That encompasses every county essentially in our state. Mr. Chairman, if you will, and of course, 1/10 of the proceeds on line 40 is going to go to the healthcare fund. Mr. Chairman, if you will, this is a constitutional amendment. I would hope that you would consider it. It is one that will cost the state of Georgia not a dime and will be a massive help to those folks in rural Georgia to generate enthusiasm in an equine industry for horse racing. And if you will, Mr. Chairman, I have Representative Evans here to speak on her piece of the bill.
Absolutely. Representative Evans, if you'll come forward and speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The language that I worked on with Representative Stevens and also the Speaker's office came about originally in a discussion of the sports betting bill, House Bill 86, which this committee passed out. My concern was, why create more money that's going to go into the lottery when we're not spending all the money that is in the lottery for education fund that we're able to spend right now? And a lot of y'all are looking at me like, what the hell are y'all talking about? What are you talking about? It's a little known fact to a lot of folks that we have been piling up excess reserves for the last 10 years in lottery that we are eligible to spend today if we wanted to appropriate those. We are by law required to hold 50% of whatever the prior year's deposits into the Lottery for Education Fund were in a reserve fund, in a lockbox, for lack of a better phrase. You put it in there, you hold it in case something happens and lottery revenues go down. You've got some money to use. It's responsible. It's what we should do. We should have some reserve money. For those that were here in 2011, you'll remember that prior to the changes in 2011, we only required a 10% reserve. So we increased that quite a bit in 2011. And at the same time that we increased it, we also passed changes that made it even less likely, if not nearly impossible, for us to ever need to draw on those reserves, because this body uncoupled the HOPE award amounts from tuition and instead tied it to lottery. So basically, if the lottery revenues go up, the HOPE award amount goes up. If the lottery revenues go down, then the HOPE award amount goes down, instead of what it was prior to that, which was tied to tuition. And that was the big concern that this body had. So we went double safe. We made it less likely that we would need the reserves, and we increased the reserves. That's great policy, generally speaking. So 50% is what we're required to hold by law. We are holding right now 128% of what we are required to hold. So we are required in dollars right now to be holding 600 million. We are holding 1.3 billion, which means essentially today we have about 730 million that we could spend. So what I've proposed here, and I hope that you will consider, is trying to draw down on those reserves and spend them for what Georgians approved them to be spent on. This state did not approve a lottery just to have a lottery. They approved it for money to go to HOPE and pre-K. So this money should not just be sitting in an account when it's not needed for fiscal safety. So it would draw down about 10% over the next few years until it levels out. And then it would say, we keep the 50% requirement, but we don't ever hold more than 60. So that's still a really big buffer. And if anybody wants to make a comparison to what we do with our rainy day funds, this is still way more conservative, because currently, and I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, this is not normally what I do. I'm a lawyer, not a number person, but we currently have in our law that if our rainy day fund for the general budget ever gets more than 15% of the budget that year, we move that extra money over to the general fund. So we only have a 15% holdback on the rainy day fund. This is going to give us a 50 to 60% holdback. So still very safe. I don't know if y'all been watching the lottery, but even during this pandemic, people have been playing. So I think the idea that the lottery funds are going to go down is already pretty remote. It's going to be even more remote that we need them because of the way we've structured the HOPE awards. And this is still going to be a huge pot of money if we were to ever get into that situation. But that money could be used for HOPE and pre-K, which everybody on this committee knows could use some more funding so that more of our students could get access to the education that they need. So that's what it's there for. I would be happy to answer any questions if the committee has any specifically about the reserves. I'm going to leave the horses to my friend, Chairman Stevens.
Thank you, Representative Evans. So, and that's good information to know. Let me ask you this, and I know it's a little bit off subject, but with that big reserve that exists there now, could we technically restore the program to what it had been and use that funding to pay for the difference now? Or is there still not enough money to go back to the way we had previously had HOPE structured?
Mr. Chairman, there's still not enough money to go back to the way that we had it structured, but there is enough money for us to go back to how it was structured for the technical college side, for the
Okay.
HOPE grant, because to put that back to the way it was is only about 40 million. And as I told you, we've got 730 million that we could spend. And even under this conservative slide out of the money, for lack of a better way to put it, it would put about, I think I did the math, it's about 200 and something million that would come out the first year, then 130 million for the next few years until it levels out. So plenty of money. There's been 72 million that has gone into the extra pot every year for the last 10 years. Certainly at this point would be fair to call it recurring funds. But to further answer your question, it would put a dent in going back to the way that it was. And for those students who attend our regional colleges, it would get them pretty close, I think, to their tuition amount. For students at UGA or Georgia Tech, the more expensive schools, you're still going to have a decent gap there for the students that don't have the Zell Miller Scholarship.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have some questions for the author of the bill, and I'm going to go to Chairman Nix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Inquiry is, are we voting on this or is this hearing only?
We are voting today, and so we will entertain motions here in just a little while. Right now, we're just having questions.
All right. With all due respect to our author, we can take this and we can wrap it in the memory of a former legislator. We can wrap it up in the Hope Scholarship. We can talk about all the jobs it's going to create, and we can put a lot of lipstick on this pig. But when we get through with it at the end of the day, we're going to expand gambling big time in the state of Georgia. I believe this is not a good idea. I think if you'll look, you'll find out that horse racing in particular is a declining sport. And if I understand it correctly, more than half of the racetracks in this country have to have casino gambling to support them. I just think this is not that great an idea. We wrap all this stuff up in these good sounding things, but at the end of the day, this is a gambling bill, and I just don't think this is a good idea. I think we need to have a much bigger, longer hearing with people to come and talk about it. I think this got added to the agenda right at the end of the day, just before we came in here, and I think that's not good. Gambling always has to have a secret portion to it. It has to be behind the curtain. Got to hide from people who might not like it, and I think this is not a great hearing. Thank you, sir.
Can I answer it? This is kind of a statement, Mr. Chairman. If Ocala, Florida is not very far from us, and this has turned out to be a boon for that area. Whenever you're looking at thoroughbred industry having a direct impact of $1.5 billion, this is huge, and it's for the horse industry and the equine industry, not necessarily just in racing alone, but it's part of the deal. And ladies and gentlemen, there is no slot machines. They're nothing except what horse racing does here. So there won't be a casino, if you will, or a racino involved in this particular legislation. But I appreciate the concern.
May I follow up?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that more than half of the racetracks have casinos because they can't support themselves?
Many of them have. That is true. But the truth is Ocala and Florida does not. They're illegal in that state. And I hope that we'll follow a very strong state that uses the economic development here for what it's intended for and to keep it a pure track.
Okay. Representative Williams, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, before I ask you a question, Chairman, I wanted to make a statement, Representative Evans. I just find it ironic that we're penny wise and dollar foolish. We're crying about pre-K's long queue of kids who can't get in the program, and we're sitting on a ton of money that could, existing money right now. I mean, we're in better shape with this than we are with the rainy day fund, my goodness. But that's for another discussion for another day. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Chairman, particularly on this, and by the way, I don't think you might have known her, but we had one of the premier equine leaders in this country, Laura Devendorf, down in Liberty County. She was on the 1996 Olympic Committee. So the only horses I'm familiar with are a few old nags that couldn't run around this capital. So I'm, without a doubt, not a horse person, but I do know when I go to see my friend, former Representative Lenmo James, that in Hawkinsville, there are some horse farms. But horses that are harness racing, but so we have some horses in Georgia, and I know in Aiken they have, I think, trotters or horse racing right across from Augusta. But the way this bill is written, would that mean, how would it be established in rural Georgia where, people would have horses or some of these things. I see a lot of feed, a lot of other auxiliary things, but how would the developers come and talk to the local community? I'm just curious. I don't know.
They would just do it. It's, right now they're being run out of the state. They're basically going to where the horse racing is. And that's the closest to us is going to be Ocala. And they've taken an area, massive farms down there, and they've done some horse racing. And it's been a boom for an area. As you might remember, 301 that runs through that used to be the main thoroughfare. Well, it's the interstates now. But they've taken and they've revitalized the area, and 1.2 billion for a county is 1.5 billion is an extraordinary amount of economic impact, and especially for all the jobs that they needed down there in that area. So you almost have two pieces here. You've got an immediate influx of $600 million of money we've already got that we can immediately start helping our folks. Where we need the jobs the most, in my mind, is in the technical education piece. And $600 million is more than half of what the current lottery brings in. So we need to start spending that money correctly, but just as important, we need to create the jobs that in the equine industry that we're losing now.
Chairman Houston, you have a question.
Well, I appreciate Representative Evans bringing this information to us, and I have a passion in my heart for pre-K and wish we could completely fund it. But I do understand Representative Nix's passion. We need to give people an opportunity to, this is sort of rushed up to add it at the very end and not giving everybody an opportunity to voice their opinion on it.
Granted, Mr. Chairman, but again, since 1968, and even whenever Representative
Well, I don't think
Gossett,
they knew it was going to come up today, did they?
they did not. If the chairman so wishes, we can just do this as a hearing, come back Thursday.
Right.
And that,
I would feel more comfortable doing that than racing up something like that and giving people an opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, without objection, I have none at all. If they just wanted to make this a hearing today, and then we'll just call another meeting on Thursday.
I think that would be a good idea, Mr. Chairman. If you're comfortable with that, we'll do that.
Sure.
All right. We have some other questions for the sponsor. Chairman Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the section, in section 1, item 3, Representative, could that be a standalone bill?
It could be, but it was, are you talking about the 1/10 proceeds going to healthcare?
No, on the first page, page 1, item 3, under section 1, that Representative Evans, could that be a standalone piece of legislation?
It could, but quite honestly, at this date, it would be appropriate because it does deal with HOPE and the taxation. It could be a standalone bill. While we're here, we have, 2 more legislative days before crossover. I'd ask that you guys consider it and consider it on this bill. I'm not sure we have time to run it through as a full bill.
Okay. Representative Neal.
Yes, can you hear me? Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing the bill. And I'll start by saying I grew up with horses. I ride now. And I have a lot of friends who own horse ranches or what have you, but my only concern, the one that comes to the top of my mind is accounting for like the animal abuse, the animal welfare, and things of that nature that comes with this. You know, some of the race horses are drugged. Racing is really hard on the horse's body. Do you account for any of that with this bill or with the process of trying to move this in general?
This is constitutional amendment. The enabling legislation
That's
should
correct.
handle
That's
some of
true.
that.
So could I have a follow-up? And just so we won't lose good opportunities either way, I would love to see this as 2 separate bills. I would hate to lose this aspect of Stacey Evans' portion of it when it comes to funding pre-K and like the representative mentioned before, Penny Houston.
Representative Dukes, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple. When you say the special health care fund, exactly what does that entail or what does that mean?
that's set aside in the Constitution on the tax revenue that 10% would go towards healthcare funding. It could be for the closed hospital down in South Georgia or future hospitals to be, it's strictly set aside to be put into a fund for healthcare.
We always go for, we always kind of buy into it down in rural Georgia, but at the end of the day, when it comes, if it's not specifically outlined, my concern is that your special healthcare fund, once you get 91, that money goes everywhere. And basically, what is really needed is a certain level of healthcare activity in our part of the state.
Understood.
So that gives me some concern. I appreciate it being there, I really do. Would the gentleman further yield?
Certainly.
And it might be a question for Representative Evans, because that's a part of her presentation in the bill. And you mentioned in your presentation that it would be 50% of the median income in Georgia.
No, so that's in mine.
That's in yours?
Yep, that's the opportunity fund that this will create, still go right through the lottery. But those families, the people that come to mind are foster kids that can't afford the difference between what Hope pays versus what the tuition costs and books and fees. Those families would be eligible for that 50% or the opportunity fund. So, but they have to be 50 percentile on their income, family income to qualify.
What would that number be? The median income for Georgia?
58,000.
Okay, 58,000. Okay. The other question is that you said that there would be an amount of money. Someone spoke to this, and I would like to know how much money would it cost to put Hope Scholarship back to where it was? How much additional revenues would we have to get?
Good question.
Yeah, Representative Evans, you kind of were speaking to that a minute ago. If you want to come forward and answer that, that'd be fine. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the grant, I can tell you it's somewhere between 10 and 20 million, depending on enrollment. So it's not that much money for the grant side of things. For the scholarship, it's hard to say because we pay a percentage and that's a different amount for every school. But it's going to be a lot more than we can do with releasing reserve funds, horse racing. I think you're also you're gonna need something else on top of that to ever get us back, if we ever do go back all the way.
Okay.
Would you further
That's a
yield?
terrible answer, and it's just really hard to know. I think that I will tell you that the reserve language in front of you will probably add on average $250 to $300 to each Hope Award amount. And so that's why I was saying at our regional schools, that might mean more than it means at UGA or Georgia Tech because the price tag is so high.
It's a 75-95% split. The 95 goes to the regionals. Is that it?
No, well, it's because tuition is different at all the schools. It ends up being it's the same dollar amount, but it's a different percentage.
I got you.
Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Representative Mallow, I believe you had a question.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on the benefits to rural Georgia. Mr. Chairman, could you provide for me just some clarification on how farmers would benefit in rural Georgia, or would this be an initiative that would cause them potentially to lose their farms if they're not doing so well in business now? They may be close to foreclosure. How would this help them? Would they be allowed to lease their farms to this industry and generate sustaining revenue without having to sell their farms and own their land outright?
No, sir. And that's a very good question. They'd be able to do it themselves. As you might recall, again, whenever you have thousands of acres that were planted in pines that are all gone now, it takes 20 years to grow these things. And let's not forget those folks who lost their entire crop of pecan trees. Those don't begin to produce again, but it allows those farmers to get into another industry that they may already be familiar with, but really because there's no horse racing there, they have no incentive. So that's kind of where I'm going. They'll be able to keep their land, but move into a different industry.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Sure.
And what would that look like? I guess that would be in the enabling legislation for essentially the cost to buy in, essentially the cost to secure a license. So say they're already a Georgia farmer, how would they get a license? What would that cost look like for them?
Actually, there's only going to be 3 tracks, and there is no cost. It's just if you want to become a horse, if you want to get into the industry of the equine industry and thoroughbreds, of course, it's expensive because a thoroughbred can be millions whenever you get those. And of course, we want to get a tax on that like they do with Kentucky and others, which is extraordinary. So it allows them to get into the industry on the low end and then move up depending on how they purchase and sell horses. So it's an additional industry. It reminds me of somebody that you know, the wind comes down and blows over their corn farm. Well, you know, they got chickens and hogs to back up on. So it's just another industry.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if you will, I think there might be, since we've got a hearing, there might be some other folks that want to testify.
All right, I'll recognize them in a minute. Chairman Smith, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more. The way the constitutional amendment's written, it says that the funds from the horse racing would increase the minimum funding requirement for educational shortfall reserves. So if it's stated like that, can you spend the money on the special healthcare fund and the opportunity fund?
Yes, if the Constitution puts it in there that way. Sure can.
All right, with that, since this is a hearing only today, those who desire to speak, if you would come forward and, or is there anyone here that would like to speak to this bill?
Okay.
All right, hearing none. I don't have any other questions from the committee. Mr. Chairman, you said on Thursday we'll reconvene for.
We should reconvene for a vote.
All right, very well. All right, well, with that, we're adjourned and enjoy the rest of your day.